Okay, so this avoda, the avoda of Eish Lahava, is ultimately to try and create foundational entry points into the avoda of the Yamim Tovim, into the time period, right? So that a Jew can live with the time. The Baal Tanya said that one of the most important things that we can do is learn how to live in line with the calendar. So that there's two ways of experiencing the calendaric unfolding of how Hashem reveals himself to us. There's one that, oh, we see that the calendar is happening and it happened once before. And any time that calendar recycles around itself, so there's a new memory of what happened all the way back then. And so that Yamim Tovim is a commemoration of that which took place. And so the history of the Jewish people, the Yamim Tovim that we've experienced, the ways in which the world was created, every time the calendar cycles back on them, so it's like, oh, this is something that happened a long time ago. And because it's something that happened a long time ago, so we're going to commemorate it, we're going to remember it, we're going to cultivate a position of closeness by way of kind of remembering that these things happened. And so to approach the Yamim Tovim that way is very beneficial. Memory, zikaron is a fundamental trait that we use as human beings and as Ovdei Hashem, right? One can argue that memory, zechira, is one of the fundamental motifs in the Torah. And the Baal Tanya makes this distinction, and really the Beis Halevi also makes this distinction in Parshas Lech Lecha when he discusses the nature of Pesach, that there's a deeper way of looking at the calendar. It's not simply the commemoration. It's not simply the commemoration or the remembering of that which happened, but rather it's a re-experiencing of that which happened. That when we talk about the Yamim Tovim, when we talk about the calendar dates that we're celebrating, so we're not just remembering something that happened in the past as if it's dead history, where at best we can awaken ourselves by the vapors of memory, which is hard, especially if we didn't see it, we don't see it, we don't know it, we don't know what it was. But the second position is that when I'm encountering a Rosh Hashanah, when I'm encountering a Pesach, when I'm encountering a Sukkot, it's not just a memory of something that happened before, but rather it's a re-experiencing of that same spiritual expression that took place all the way back then. And I'm experiencing it now as well. When we look at Yantif, when we look at the calendar in a way of lived experience, where the time that we're celebrating is in fact expressing itself right here, right now. So what we do is we open ourselves up to a different spiritual trait than memory. Right? Memory is a very, very Helig trait. Memory is what allows me to connect to something that is no longer present. And it's a miracle, right? Memory is tchias hamesim. Something dies. When something is forgotten, it's nishkach kemes min halev. There's a synonymous relationship between forgetfulness and death, because both are really the same lumdus. And then zikaron would be a tchias hamesim, so I'm remembering something that's no longer here. But when I live the time period in a real way and I enter into the Yamim Tovim and I begin to see time not as simply this linear structure that goes from a past to a future, and I begin to live the calendar as if it's happening right now in more of a spiraling type of way, every time that there's a ha'ara, every time that a yontif arrives, it's a new opportunity to enter into it, to enter into the flow of spirituality. Now, what does this mean for us on a practical level? That instead of entering into the Yamim Tovim, instead of entering into Rosh Hashanah, for example, with the knowledge that Hashem created the world and that in the creation of the world there were certain things that took place, instead of looking at it as something that happened back then, we begin to look at the experiences that took place then, right here, right now. So that even though it's Rosh Hashanah, Tafshin Pei Hey, Pei Vav, sorry, Pei Vav, right? We're not just remembering this Rosh Hashanah because it's this many years since the creation of the world. This Rosh Hashanah has never happened before. The Rosh Hashanah of Tafshin Pei Vav has never happened before. And even though all of the Rosh Hashanahs before it were similar, nevertheless, this level of revelation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to reveal himself to creation, to us, to our minds, is singularly unique. And so in this very gentle shift, what happens is the calendar goes from something dead that needs to be memorialized to something that's very much alive that needs to be experienced. You hear the distinction, Chevra? Right? And so the Beis Halevi makes there's a beautiful way in which the Beis Halevi describes this, where he says that we think we celebrate Pesach because Pesach happened on Yud Daled Nisan, and every subsequent Yud Daled Nisan is going to be a commemoration of that which took place at the first Yud Daled Nisan. And the Beis Halevi says, no, that's mistaken. In truth, before the creation of the world, there was a metzius of time, there was a Seder Hazmanim, where Hashem decided exactly that which was going to unfold in accordance with each and every moment in history. And there was set in existence a Yud Daled Nisan, which is Mesugel to the Geula. And it just so happened that in the Yud Daled Nisan, in the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, is when Yetzias Mitzrayim took place. But it doesn't mean that that was the only Yud Daled Nisan. Yud Daled Nisan is a Metzias of Geula. And that Metzias of Geula is Megala itself. It reveals itself every time that Yud Daled Nisan turns around. And so too with Rosh Hashanah. And so all of that is to say that the first step in approaching Yamim Tovim b'derech penimius, and this is the same thing when a person approaches it b'derech diuk halacha, but that I'm not entering into something that happened already. I'm preparing myself to experience something in real time. And so that for the rest of the world that might not be attuned to this secret, the yontif might just be a memorialization. For the person who's leaning into the inner processes of the calendar, we're experiencing it as if it's taking place in real time for the first time. And that creates a new posture of Avodas Hashem. Because now when I'm going to shul, I'm not just thinking about Vordlach. I'm not just reading a mimer from Rav Hutner. I'm not just remembering or of Moshe Shapiro Shir. I'm not just repeating ideas from the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov. These ideas are handles through which I gain insight into what's taking place. The Divrei Torah that surround the Zmanim are there to give us a proper grasp of what it is that's taking place and to utilize the opportunities available to us. That's what the tzaddikim gave us. They gave us a language that's not just a dead language of memory to try and revitalize something that's empty. Adarabba, it's giving us the tools to enter into the flow of time with the full recognition that right here, right now is the fundamental expression of this. So Rosh Hashanah is an entry point into a particular light. So too Hanukkah and Purim and and Yom Kippur. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try and lean into the times. Now, there's two reasons that this is so important to transform time and the Yomim Tovim and our experiences from simply a commemoration of something that has happened in the past, which creates a certain form of alienation between the here and the now and the back then, versus seeing the here and the now as the fullest revelation of Hashem. And that is, number one, we can be very frum about it. We can experience spirituality. We can experience the yontif in the way that it's meant to be experienced, where there can be hislahavus, and the person can feel excited when they hear about shofar because they realize what's happening. But it also provides a deep sense of comfort. It provides a deep sense of hope. Because one of the things that we're going to see from the Ari, in general, this is the shape of the Arizal, and the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov and the Talmidei Hagra are both coming to be garments to the system of the Arizal, as we're going to see. But what it enables us to do is realize that the opportunities of Yontif are as real as they were at the beginning of history, at the first time that these Yomim Tovim took place. That when I'm hearing shofar, and when I'm davening Musaf, or when I'm dipping the apple in the honey, the potency and the value and the comfort and the rectifications and the fixing and the illumination that comes about with these mitzvos and maisim tovim, that they're happening right here, right now, through our own efforts, meaning to say that the human being takes on a profound level of responsibility in the unfolding process of Hashem's light in our lives. That's the gift of living the calendar in a living way, that this Yom Tif, these Yomim Tovim that we enter into, are portals in time. And the Arizal gives us a picture. The Arizal gives us a fundamental painting of what the entire year looks like. Each Yom Tif has its own or. And the or of Rosh Hashanah is an interesting or. and there's many, many angles to go at it. But when it comes to penimius, whatever angle we go at, we ultimately come to the same place. Just as there were 12 different gates, there are many different gateways of prayer, many different gateways of minhag, many different gateways to Yerushalayim, many different svarim. Each and every one represents a path towards the same destination. So when it comes to penimius, if a person is going to be moved by a statement from the Arizal, by the Gra, by the Baal Shem Tov, by the Rashash, by the Ramchal, by the Talmidim, it's all going to the same place. It's all going to the same place. There was once upon a time a Moshe Rabbeinu came and revealed the Torah in the world. And that was the revealed Torah. That was the Torah that Klal Yisrael received. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu received everything. Moshe Rabbeinu received the inside and the outside. Moshe Rabbeinu was above and below at once. Moshe Rabbeinu received everything that was going to be revealed. And it was only later on in subsequent generations where that inner quality of the Torah needed to be revealed. Why? Because we could no longer draw the strength from the chitzoniut hadvarim. And so what took place at that time was the revelation of the Zohar HaKadosh, the revelation of the inner territory of Torah's Moshe. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai are. Moshe Rabbeinu is the written, revealed Torah, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the inside of the revealed Torah. Every pasuk becomes a portal by which a person is going to access Shamayim. And it took a lot for Rabbi Shimon to be Megala what he was Megala. It took a lot of suffering on behalf of the Jewish people to merit the necessity of understanding penimius in a more revealed way. And then there were more and more generations, and then came along the Arizal. And the Arizal was really the next, after the Ramak, was the next development of a new level of revelation of penimius HaTorah, giving us an understanding of what's taking place on the inside of reality. The Arizal, the Svarim say, looked at the Aretz, looked at human experience, and wanted to lift us up back up to Shamayim, to give us insight as to what was happening in Shamayim. But then, for a number of reasons, the words of the Arizal, either because they were misconstrued or because they were too esoteric, and it was too difficult for a person living down here in this world to draw strength by knowing about what was going on upstairs in the upper worlds, that there was a furthering of the revelation. And this is what takes place in the 1700s ultimately, where the Arizal was the Nahar Hayoitze Megan Eden. Right? If we could say that the Torah of Moshe is the Torah of the world, the Torah of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the Torah of Gan Eden, the Torah of the Arizal is the Nahar Hayoitze Megan Eden. Right? It's a river that flows forth from Gan Eden. It's the ability to draw out the wisdom of the Zohar HaKadosh and the wisdom of penimius HaTorah and to bring it into something that we can try and understand. And that Nahar, that Yotze Megan Eden, split into 4 rivers. And those 4 rivers were the 4 tzaddikim who lived in that time period. All of them crossed over each other for at least 1 year. And that was the Rashash of Shalom Sharabi, the Severity Mikubalim, who took the writings of the Arizal and developed an entire system of tefillah and understanding. There were the words of the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Lutzato. There were the words of the Gra, Rav Eliyahu Kramer, and there were the words of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, Rav Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. Now, these 4 pathways through which the writings of the Arizal took on a new shape in the lives of the Jewish people, where it became something that was much more accessible, much more urgent, much more therapeutic, and much more fundamental, is basically the sum total of penimius HaTorah. These 4 tzaddikim and their Batei Midrashim, and the Batei Midrashim that come from their Batei Midrashim. This is the birth of penimius HaTorah. So what we have in front of us now is all of this fully developed penimius. And we tend to think, okay, the Gra is saying something, and the Ramchal is saying something, and the Baal Shem Tov is saying something, and the Rashash is saying something. And a person becomes very overwhelmed. But it's very important to realize that whatever starting point we have in penimius, we're going to the same place. If a person is learning a Kedushas Levi, and that's going to be the idea that they're thinking about over Yantiv, they're not missing out on what the Gra says. They're not missing out on what the Ramchal says, and they're not missing out on what the Rashash says. Because if we understand what Chasidus is and what Machshava is, which is ultimately a commentary on the Arizal, so then whatever sugya we're holding in, we're entering into the palace. There's a letter from Rav Simcha ben Pshischa, famous letter. This is a letter that has been discussed by many, many people. There's svarim that are written on this letter. Rav Elia Weintraub, Schus Yogan Aleinu. every year would teach a little bit about this letter. And I'll send the letter to you guys afterwards. But basically, Rav Simcha ben Pshischa, whose yahrzeit it was last week, I believe, wrote to somebody with regards to Rosh Hashanah. And he said that when it comes to the inyan of Rosh Hashanah, a person has to remember that the whole secret of Rosh Hashanah is Meirachok Hashem Nirali. Meirachok Hashem Nirali, that Hashem appears to me from a distance. And if a person has the ability of understanding this secret of Rosh Hashanah, if Hashem appeared to me at a distance, so then a person can come to understand the secret of Rosh Hashanah. So that's what I want to talk about right now. What I want to talk about over the next few minutes, Chavra, is this idea of Rosh Hashanah being a time of Meirachok Hashem Nirali. And what that might mean for us on a practical way, and what that means for us, especially when it comes time for Rosh Hashanah. And again, one point before going down into the sugya, Chavra, you with me so far? One point before going down into the sugya is that one of the qualities of our calendar, one of the qualities of the way that everything functions is that it's unified. And so, in science and in developing new ideas, we have this idea called a fractal. A fractal is that when something breaks or something is splintered apart, we're not just breaking a pre-existing whole, but every part that's taken from a pre-existing whole is going to show itself to have the same qualities as the whole. This is a fundamental principle when it comes to penimius, and it's best described as kind of a holographic principle. That on a hologram, you might have a picture of a baseball player, right? That's focused and lasered onto the hologram so that if you turn it, it's going to take a different shape and it looks like one singular unified image. But then if that were to break and it were to shatter into 10 pieces, so instead of having lost the image, what a person would come to find is that each piece of glass of the hologram contains the entirety of the picture. And so a holographic principle means that the unity that we see is in truth fractalized, that every piece of that unified whole contains the entire system of itself. And so that means to say that even though we can look at the calendar as one long story, each and every day, and in truth, each and every moment in time, contains all other moments within itself. And that each day can be considered a lifetime. A person is born in the morning, they hit their midlife crisis around lunchtime, and when the person puts their head down on the pillow at night, it's an element of death. And so each day is a lifetime, even though a lifetime is only composed of many, many days. And so too, the entirety of the Jewish calendar can be found within each and every day as well. There's a Rosh Hashanah every day, there's a Yom Kippur every day, there's a teshuvah every day, there's a Purim every day, a Chanukah every day. And so all of the qualities that we learn about when it comes to learning about the Yamim Tovim, when it comes to learning about the kavanos of the Yamim Tovim, those are things that we have access to each and every day as well. Story goes with the Divrei Chaim that he was making Kiddush on Pesach once. And when it came time to be Mazkir the Yontif, he said another Yontif, and the Talmidim corrected him. And then it happened again, and he said another Yontif, and the Talmidim corrected him. And it happened 2 or 3 times more until he was able to focus in on the Yontif that it actually was. And Tzaddikim explained that for the Divrei Chaim, what he was experiencing was a revelation of the fact that all of the Yamim Tovim are revealed in each and every day, in each and every moment. And so whatever we learn about penimius HaTorah, whatever we learn about the Yamim Tovim, these are tools that can be applied to a person's life on a day-to-day basis. I'm a big believer that penimius is valuable because it's therapeutic for us. Right? The learning of penimius for myself alone is not to be a tzaddik, is not to be a makubal, God forbid, is not to be someone who feels that they know something, but rather it's to find the therapeutic and kind of comforting salve that the insight into what's actually happening offers a person. And so there's a profound level of therapeutic insight that can be found in these ideas every day of the year. And so Mirachel Kashem Nirali. The entire process of Rosh Hashanah is an encounter with a place of hisrachkus, a place of distance, a place of entering into a certain level of concealment that we didn't consider beforehand. The Zman of Elul, contrary to popular belief and what we've been taught, is not so much about new beginnings, but it's about endings. Right? Elul is the death of the year. Elul is the end of the year. And because it's the end of the year, it's almost like the ir miklat of the year. Every year, We've had expectations, we've had dreams, we've had certain things that we want to see accomplished, certain tikkunim that we wanted to bring out. And then what we find by the end of the year is that lo halach, it didn't go. We didn't get to where we needed to go. And come Elul, a person is remembering, oh my goodness, there's so many dreams, so many ideas that I killed off this year that I wasn't able to accomplish. And what happens when a person realizes that they're an accidental murderer, that they've destroyed things by accident, is that the Torah gives us a mitzvah of the Ir Miklat, a place, a city of refuge where an accidental murderer can run and protect themselves. And that's what's happening in Elul. The Arizal points out that Elul is Rosh Tevos Ana Liyado V'Samtalo, that the place of accidental murdering takes place in Elul. Elul is a hint to that. And V'Samtalo, and placing a place for us and making a city of refuge, is what Elul is. So at the end of the year, we're running into a city of refuge because we feel that we can't continue with the gas that we have in the tank from last Rosh Hashanah. The energy, the spiritual vitality, the excitement, the hope, the spiritual considerations and courage that we started the year with brought us to the end. And now that we're at the end, we feel that we have nothing left. That's what Elul is. That's Kedalim Ukadarashim Dafaknu Dalasecha. We are knocking on your door, Ribbon Shleilim, like impoverished individuals, like destitute individuals. That when we come to Avinu Malkeinu, what we're ultimately going to say is not what we can do or what we do, but the last point is Avinu Malkeinu Chanenu Vanenu Ki'im Banu Ma'asim. We have nothing. Kedalim Ukarashim Dafaknu Dalasecha. That's the posture of Elul. And Elul is a difficult position, right? As the tzaddikim say, Rav Tzadok says, Kol hatchalot kashot. Why are all beginnings difficult? Not because beginnings are so difficult, but because every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And Mamela, it's difficult for something to end and for something to be placed to death. And for us to acknowledge that, yeah, Taka, this year was not the year. This year was not the year that I thought it would be. And here I am trying to figure out how to make it another year. But how does a person who over and over has thought that it was going to be the year and then is suddenly exposed to the fact that it wasn't the year, how do we re-spark ourselves? What's the avodah of Rosh Hashanah in terms of giving ourselves strength that this can be the year now? Even though I couldn't do it last year, maybe this is going to be the year. And I believe that where Simcha Bunim is offering us is this principle, Meirachok Hashem Nirali. The only way to begin again is to acknowledge the fact that Amarti Echakmeh v'hi rechoika mimeni. I thought I knew. I thought I got it. I thought I had an understanding of what this world was. I thought I had an understanding of what Hashem was. I thought I had an understanding of what the Torah was and what mitzvahs are. I thought I knew what my avodas Hashem would be. I thought I knew what my spiritual development would be. Then I come to realize at the end of the year that there were a lot of things that I was wrong about. And instead of feeling disappointment and instead of feeling forlornness and instead of feeling spiritual hypocrisy, it's this very feeling of distance from our ideal that becomes the beginning point of the new year. That in recognizing that things did not go exactly the way that we wanted them to go, that's how we enter into a new Rosh Hashanah, from a place of richuk, from a place of recognizing that bekesa liyom chagenu. If I'm going to want to crown you again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if I'm going to want to reveal you again, then I'm going to have to lean into the kisoy hadavar, into the concealment of the thing. Rosh Hashanah is not a day where Hashem's kingship is revealed in a clarified way. It's the day that we accept the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingship, in spite of the fact that we don't necessarily see it in a revealed way. And this entry into this space of distance and darkness and not knowing is the very place in which we're going to be able to prepare ourselves to crown Hashem for the incoming year. Because Rosh Hashanah represents Rosh Hashinoi, that we're going back up prior to all of the changes. Shana means shinoi, all of the changes, all of the time periods of the year. Beroish hashinoi is that we're going above all of the changes and we're going back to the source of time. As the Baal Tanya says that the vitality of the year dries up and Hashem needs to reveal new vitality for the year, which means that we have to go back to the drawing board. We have to go all the way back. What we're doing on Rosh Hashanah is we're entering back into a place of memory. We're going back to a place beyond time, back to a place beyond revelation, back to a place beyond what we feel that we have a grasp on, into that hidden place in the mind where we encounter what can only be considered the concealment of Hashem. When a person tries to dig down deep and go back to the source of all things, what we're often going to come to find is a blackness behind the closed eyes, a certain distance, a certain not knowing. And very often the spiritual posture is to run away from that. We want to know, we want to have clarification, we want to know exactly what we need to do. I don't want to have to deal with concealment. I don't want to have to deal with richuk. I don't want to have to deal with a sense of distance. But the spiritual bravery that is cultivated every Rosh Hashanah is the ability for Klal Yisrael to go specifically into that place of concealment, to go into that place of darkness, to go into that place of Bekesa Liyom Chagenu, that time when the moon is diminished, that place where there appears to be no light, where it appears that there's dinim and gvuros. If a person looks at what the Arizal writes or the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov write about Rosh Hashanah, we'll see that it's filled with all types of discussions about Gevuros and Dinim. That the first day is a severe din, and the second day is a less severe din. One day is the Gevuros of Leah, one day is the Gevuros of Rachel. Again, just an exposure to what are Dinim. Dinim mean concealment. Dinim mean pockets of energy in our lives that feel really tight and feel really difficult, and those locks that we all have in our neshamos and those hang-ups and all of those stuff that we see on the outside and on the inside, those are dinim, blockage points that block the flow of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light in our mind, which breeds comfort, faith, and ease. There's also real dinim and gvuros that the tzaddikim are dealing with on a historic level, on a political level. But for each and every one of us, what we're doing is we're entering into that place of Gevura. We're entering into that place of Bekesa Liyom Chagenu, where I'm saying to Hashem, you know what? Maybe instead of thinking that your absence or your concealment is something that needs to be overcome, maybe it's something that I have to learn how to deal with, and maybe it's something that I have to learn how to lean deeply into so that I can better approach it. Because while Rosh Hashanah talks about din, and Rosh Hashanah talks about judgment, and Rosh Hashanah talks about contrition, and Rosh Hashanah talks about the need for self-reflection, it also speaks of a profound capacity of the mind that once I realize that I don't have to be afraid of Hashem's concealment, and that in truth Hashem is as present in his concealment as he is whenever he reveals himself. So then leaning into the concealment, leaning into the fact that I don't see you, Hashem, I don't feel you, Hashem, I feel distance from you, Hashem, it stops being distance from Hashem. It becomes the development of a relationship with Hashem. If until Rosh Hashanah, whenever Hashem wasn't present in my life, I felt that Hashem wasn't there, and I felt that I had no relationship with Hashem, and I felt that I had no capacity to connect my mind to faith or to bitachon or to simcha or to yira pnimi, because I don't feel it and I don't see it, because I just want kirvas elokim litov. I just want closeness. If I don't have closeness, then I don't have anything. Rosh Hashanah is a time where it says, yeah, Avada, we want closeness, but first and foremost, the closeness has to be built not from a place of kirva, but from a place of richuk, from a place of meirachok Hashem nirali. Because if I develop my relationship with Hashem by way of kirva, then I'm only going to be related to Hashem when I'm in a moment of kirvas Hashem litov. And that's great for someone who's a tzaddik, who's always karev to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what about everybody else who sometimes ebbs and flows and feels distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? If my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is built upon kirva, closeness, proximity, and attachment, so then it's what Chazal describe as an ahava shetali b'davar, a love that's dependent on something. Masha ein kain, when we enter into that concealment of Hashem, of bekesel yom chagenu, of merachok Hashem nirali, and I crown HaKadosh Baruch Hu as king in that place, so then I'm finding Hashem and I'm determining that Hashem is going to be in my life when he's revealed and when he's concealed. I'm not making my relationship with Hashem or my belief in Hashem dependent on his revelation in my life or in my feelings or in my experience. That's nice. It's great to feel kirva. It's great to feel dveikus. But the fundamental acceptance of Kabbalah Sal Malchus Shemayim, of Bekesel Liyom Chagenu Ki Chok L'Yisrael Hu, is the acceptance of the fact that Hashem, I'm with you no matter what. Whether you're revealed, whether you're concealed, I'm with you. Achenata kel mestatar. I understand that Merochok Hashem nirali is not simply saying, oh, even though I'm distant, I can still believe in Hashem. Adarabba, Ibcha Mastaber, it's Meracho Gdaika Hashem nearly, specifically by leaning in to this territory of distance and constriction, that I'm going to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I'm going to come to a closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because in addition to the Gvuros of Rosh Hashanah, there's also the element of Hamtakas Hadinim. When we encounter Gvuros in this world, when Hashem reveals himself by way of constriction, so it starts with Hashem's concealment, but eventually it descends down until that concealment of Hashem gets translated into Gevura, into severity, into constriction, into limits, into measurements. And then when those go down a number line and we no longer realize where it's coming from, that gets transformed into something we might refer to as dinim, which are more negative judgments, more difficult scenarios, not just concealment in an abstract way, but real human experience and the suffering that comes with it. And then that can descend down even a level further into what we might refer to as klipos, or concealing sheaths of darkness in the world. Again, all of these ideas are all cousins of a singular point, which is that Hashem hides himself sometimes. And because the world is going to be filled with gevura, and gevura is constriction, and gevura is limits, and when we encounter limitations and constrictions in our lives, whether it's in our interpersonal relationships, our personal introspection, our relationship with Hashem, we encounter blockages, we encounter menios, we encounter moments of prevention, something referred to as hisnagdus haratzon, where the world seems to be antagonistic towards us. These are the gvuros. And the Arizal, when it comes to the shofar, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, he teaches us the secret of hamtakas hadinim b'shorasham, sweetening the judgments at their root. This is something that we're thinking about when we hear the shofar. That Rosh Hashanah is a time of din, Rosh Hashanah is a time of constriction, and it's a time of encountering all of the difficulties. But then the shofar is that hamtakas hadinim, the time of sweetening the difficulty. And what is hamtakas hadinim b'shorasham? Hamtakas hadinim b'sharasham, the rectification of constriction in its root, is exactly what it sounds like. When I draw something back up to its root, when I take an offshoot, when I take something that has unfolded and revealed itself to be something difficult, if I bring it back up to its source, if I slowly but surely go level after level after level after level, whereby contemplating this moment of constriction and the cause of this feeling of constriction, and I abstract it a level above, and I come to realize perhaps it might be coming from this place, and then I go a level above and I say it's coming from this place, this place, this place. Eventually, if I bring all of the constriction back up, I come to realize one thing and one thing only, that achin ata kel mastater, all constriction comes from you, Hashem. Constriction is not the opposite of you. Constriction is not the absence of you. Constriction is not the disappearance of you, God forbid. It's an expression of you. Everything's an expression of you. And if I'm encountering myself in pockets of difficulty, in pockets of struggle, and spiritual exhaustion, and familial exhaustion, whatever the feelings might be, that's a din. And the way to be mamtik that din is to bring it all the way, all the way, all the way, all the way back up to the source of all dinim, which is Hashem's ability to hide himself for the creation of the world. And when we recognize that all of the constriction, all of the difficulty, all of the minutia and the details of all of the different gevuros, that they're all in fact reflective of a singular truth, which is that Hashem's infinite light needed to be concealed in order for this world to be created, and that the concealment itself is Hashem, and that Bekesa liyom chagenu, you reveal yourself by way of concealment, and that the olam is from a language of he'elem, and that to be a human being is to be someone who's caught up in the struggle of concealment, we bring it all the way back up and we realize, Hashem, you're here just as much. Hamtakas hadinim b'sharasham, what's happening when we're looking at the person doing the Tkiyah Shofar and we see the redness on their cheeks, which the Arizal says to think about. When you see the redness on the face of the Baal Tokeya, think about the redness of din, think about the redness of constriction, difficulty, intensity. And again, it's not being firm about it. My own struggles, whatever it is that I'm encountering in my own world, that's the din. If I can think about Klal Yisrael, Hareza Meshubach, but sometimes a person has to think about themselves. And when Rosh Hashanah comes along, we're saying, Hashem, I'm preparing myself for the upcoming year, that the entire shape of constriction, the entire shape of concealment is going to be a place where I encounter you. There's not going to be any moment this year that I allow constriction to confuse me. There's not going to be any moment this year where I begin to fall into the trap of thinking that distance implies that you're not there. Rosh Hashanah is the preparation for the incoming year because we're saying, Hashem, we accept upon ourselves to find you everywhere. I'm willing to accept a new relationship with you, Hashem, this year. I'm willing to do it for another year. I'm willing to lean in for another year, but on one condition. And that condition is that we understand Hashem, Merachok Hashem nirali, that you appear to me by way of a distance. You're not distance. You are appearing by way of a distance. The distance is you as well. And this is what Rosh Hashanah is about. Everything about Rosh Hashanah, the effort, the movement inwards to crown HaKadosh Baruch Hu as king, is to cultivate the inner resolve of a neshama that knows that there is absolutely nothing in this world that can distance me from you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To accept kingship of Hashem when things are going well means that I will accept Hashem as king when things are going well. But what happens when things don't go well? Well, we know that an ava shetali b'davar, a love that is dependent on something, if that davar is muvutul, then the love also begins to appear that it's muvutul, God forbid. But an ahava she'eno tali b'davar, something that is built upon nothing other than my willingness to lean into it, there's nothing that could be mevatel that. This is why the entire avodah is the avodah of emunah, of Kabbalah Malchus Shemayim. Hamtakas Adinim, the rectification of all severity, ultimately comes about by one thing and one thing alone, emunah. The cultivation of closeness to God in times of his distance is referred to as emunah, emunas chabalelos. Acceptance of God's kingship in a world where it's not fundamentally clear that God is king is an act of emunah. Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim. That's what we're doing on Rosh Hashanah. It's a big Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim, where in spite of the fact that we might not see Hashem as king in a revealed way, we might not be able to point to the places in our lives where Hashem reveals himself as king. On Rosh Hashanah, we lean into that place. And again, this is what all of the themes of Rosh Hashanah are about. Forgetfulness. Forgetfulness becomes such a motif on Rosh Hashanah because forgetfulness means falling into that place. Falling into that place of forgetting Hashem, forgetting Hashem's presence, forgetting Ein Od Milvado. When a person forgets something, it's not simply the loss of information. It reflects the existential quandary of what it means to be a human being in this world. That we live within the current of time and things fall apart and things can't be retrieved, etc., etc. And Zocher Kol HaNishkachos, the secret of memory on Rosh Hashanah is looking at forgetfulness, not pretending forgetfulness doesn't exist, looking at forgetfulness and saying, Hashem, in spite of the forgetfulness, Zocher Kol HaNishkachos. There's a secret of Zechira within Shichacha. Yom HaZikaron is the secret of memory that's unfolding from within forgetfulness itself. Rosh Hashanah Yotze Yosef Mibeis HaAsurin, that Rosh Hashanah is about cultivating the courage to walk out of our own jail cells. To walk out of our jail cell. What's the jail cell? The jail cell is that I find you sometimes, Hashem. When things are good, and when things are bad, things are bad. That's a jail cell. When the guard is nice, they're nice, and when the guard is not nice, they're not nice. Yosef HaTzadik lived in that jail cell assuming that there was a whole part of existence that was angry towards him. Leaving that prison is realizing that Hashem, I'm as connected to you in times of concealment as I am in times of connectivity. And in fact, the cultivation, the spiritual growth that takes place in moments of constriction, when I can close my eyes deeply enough and say, Hashem, you're here in everything, you're here in everything, in everything, in everything, in everything. That's Hamtakas Adinim B'Sharasham. That's being Makabel Malchus Shemayim. That's crowning HaKadosh Baruch Hu as king from within the Gevuros themselves, from within the Dinim themselves. And then something happens. When a person comes to a place of realizing that ha'alama and concealment and constriction in our lives, in reality, in Torah, are all places in which Hashem is revealing himself, so there's a joy that comes out. There's a hidden joy, there's a silent joy, there's a humble joy of Rosh Hashanah, which comes about when a person realizes that there's nothing in this world that's devoid of you, Hashem. You're everywhere. I don't have to feel it on Rosh Hashanah, because even the not feeling it is a revelation of you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And on a practical level, what this looks like in Avodah is that when I'm in the parts of my day that are not dveikus, that are not the mitzvos hayom, where I'm not learning a mimer from Pachad Yitzchak, where I'm not osik in a sugya, but rather in the in-between places in my life, those places of gvuros or dinim, which are just circumstances where I feel that, I'm not doing what I need to be doing right now. I'm too busy with this, or I'm bothered by this, or this kid is bothering me, or this person, or my spouse, or this, all of those different parts of Yontif, which make us feel like we're missing it. That's the main place of Avodah on Yom Tif. We have to lean into those places. On Rosh Hashanah, it's realizing any moment that a person finds their mind meandering or entering into a territory of sadness, darkness, despondency, frustration, resentment, agitation, loneliness, distance. The mind has to capture itself and it has to remember, Hashem, you're here right now. Hashem Melech HaOlam, you're king of all concealment, you're king of all constriction. You reveal the light in everything. And that's how we crown HaKadosh Baruch Hu as king on Rosh Hashanah. It's not specifically when we're standing face to face with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, panim el panim. But we scream HaMelech from the back of the shul. Rav Moshe Wolfson's Tzlusa Ganalenu would point out that the entire secret of Rosh Hashanah is crowning HaKadosh Baruch Hu from a place of distance. And therefore, when it comes time for Shacharis, right, we say the Shliach Tzibur when they're standing in front of the Amud, that's a place of connection. So they're able to say HaMelech. But our tradition is to scream HaMelech from someplace far behind the Amud. Why? Because on Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't matter where we are, it doesn't matter how we feel, it doesn't matter what vantage point we're approaching the king from. Our recognition that Hashem is king wherever we find ourselves is the Iker Giloi. Rosh Hashanah is about Hashem's kingship extending far beyond the Jewish people, far beyond the confines of my mind, but extending itself across the entirety of existence. The distance itself becomes the very vessel through which the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be revealed. This is also what's happening in terms of an interpersonal relationship. From a psychological perspective, so to say, from a nefesh perspective. What's taking place on Rosh Hashanah is something called the Nesira, that we tend to assume that relationships are panim el panim, that a face-to-face relationship with our loved ones, with Hashem, with ourselves, is ultimately going to be the only place where something real can be cultivated, where something real can be revealed. But back to back, achor ba'achor, that's going to feel like it's very difficult, where I'm missing the point. Rosh Hashanah is about rebuilding a relationship from within a place of distance. And realizing and saying to Hashem, this is the Giloy, this is the one Nakuda that I'm trying to be masbir, that Rosh Hashanah is about saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, you are king. You are king because I decided that you're king. You're always king, Hashem. But you wanted something more. You wanted us to know that you're king. And because you wanted us to know that you're king and you're willing to create another year where we're going to be forced to accept you as king and know that you're king, so then right now the matter is going to be dependent on me. Your kingship, Hashem, is not dependent on your revelation. It's dependent on my acceptance of it. And what the mind, what the neshama is learning on Rosh Hashanah is the ability to see Hashem everywhere, to find Hashem everywhere, to prepare for an incoming year where we know that there's going to be moments where we don't see Hashem. We know that there's going to be moments where we don't feel connected, but nevertheless to radically affirm the fact that Hashem, I'm the one who decides whether you're going to be revealed in my mind or not. By me saying that you're Melech, you're Melech. This is what the entire Sha'ar Rishon of Nefesh HaChaim is about. That when a Jewish person decides that Hashem is going to be revealed in their minds, well, Hashem is revealed in their minds. When a Jewish person decides, God forbid, to conceal Hashem from their minds, well, then Hashem is concealed from their minds. The avodah of Rosh Hashanah is realizing, Hashem, that whatever the concealment of the year is going to be, you're there. And whether it's going to be in moments of forgetfulness or a tendency towards anger or the emergence of resentments or concern or financial anxiety or whatever it is, each and every one of those moments are pockets of tzimtzum, are moments of preparation where I can reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingship. And as all of the Svarim say, there's two types of people who accept the kingship of the king. There's someone who's always agreed with the king, and then there's the acceptance of kingship by someone who's always been misnagid to the king. someone who's always been a position of distance from the king. And if we can imagine for ourselves the pleasure that the king would receive from these two types of closeness, well, on the one hand, there's the typical proximity of someone who feels always connected. But if I've always felt connected and I always feel Hashem's presence, so then it's not such a novelty. It's nice, but if something operates always in the same way, it grows boring. And there's not so much of a novelty that comes about when a person who feels that Hashem is present in their lives, and they've always felt that, when that person comes to accept HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingship. But someone who's been misnaged to the Ratzon of the king, and then for whatever reason feels compelled to accept the kingship of that king upon themselves, well, the kavod that's going to come to the king from that place is far greater than the kavod that comes to the king from someone who's always been close to him. When we come to uncover HaKadosh Baruch Hu in darkness, in choshech, in the choshech that preceded creation, in a choshech that's not a darkness that's bad, but a darkness that just means that Hashem conceals himself. Concealment doesn't mean the opposite of Hashem. Adarabah, concealment is the way in which Hashem reveals himself. When we come to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in those places of distance, we're creating the greatest vessel of closeness. And this comes back to what Rav Simcha Bunim was saying, the whole notion of Rosh Hashanah, whether we want to look at it from the apple, which represents the bitterness that needs to be sweetened in the honey, whether we want to look at it from the perspective of Kavanas HaAchila, which is that I need to move from being an animal into being a human being, and the only way to really do that is to chew my food a little bit more before I swallow it, and to look at the color of the food and to smell the food before I eat it. If it means that I'm going to have to be makabel each person with sever panim yafos, and that's my avodah of Rosh Hashanah, all of it is about coming from a place of distance and entering into a place of closeness. That's the avodah of Rosh Hashanah, of entering into that choshech, entering into that hastara, entering into that bekesel yom chagenu, entering into that jail cell where everything appears to be nothing, and it's all just one pinpointed dot of concealment. And to give the crown back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rosh Hashanah is a scary day, it's a vulnerable day, but it's a powerful day. Because what we're realizing is that Hashem, you need us also. You need us to crown you as king. And when we realize that Hashem needs us to crown him as king, then we realize that, okay, Hashem, if you need my avodah, and most of my avodah is going to be avodah from within a place of concealment, so then the avodah of crowning Hashem as king in the concealment is the greatest avodah that I can do. And it's going to give birth to a profound level of simcha. There's a simcha, there's joy. There's a joy that comes out when a person realizes that Hashem, you're here. Hashem, you're here, I see you here. Even though I don't see you, I see you. Even though I don't know you, I know you. It's mirachok Hashem nirali. From a distance, you appeared to me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm yearning for you. I'm yearning to draw you down into my life. This is the avodah of Rosh Hashanah. And this is obviously avodah that we can engage in each and every day. Person is nidon in each and every day. There's a moment of concealment in each and every day where it's not clear to us whether we're going to be with Hashem even in the concealment of our experiences. When we crown HaKadosh Baruch Hu as king, and we accept upon ourselves the yoke of heaven, and we say all of the dinim, all of the gvuros, I'm going to be mamtik them in their shoresh, which means that it's not that this is bad and Hashem, you're going to bring something down that's good. There is nothing that's not Hashem. That's Hamtakas Adinim B'Sharashim, where I realize that everything, every ounce of revelation in this world is an expression of you, Hashem. And in that place, we accept upon ourselves the ability to crown HaKadosh Baruch Hu as king. It's not meant to, God forbid, be a sad avodah. Adarabah. When it comes to concealment, there's a fundamental nakuda, and if this is the one nakuda that comes across in Chevra, I apologize I hope this is not meandering. I hope there's some clarity that's coming out. But the entire system of penimius Torah is coming to teach, really at its core, as I understand it, a simple thing. Is that for a really, really long time, we've been taught about concepts of revelation and concealment, or and choshech, gilui and simsum. And we assume that when Hashem is revealed, he's revealed, and when Hashem is concealed, he's not there. When something is present, it's there. When something is absent, it's not there. When something is dark, it's not light. But what penimius Torah comes to teach us, especially through the secret of the tzimtzum, which is really what Rosh Hashanah is, it's another tzimtzum for the year, is that the concealment is a revelation, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself by way of concealment, that the entire Metzias is a lavush. And like any levush, it's a garment that contains something in order to reveal it. Hashem's light is so infinite that without containment, without constriction, without the sheaths and the veils of darkness and concealment that seem to cover over it, we would have absolutely no ability to even come to understand that there's such a thing as HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we need to connect ourselves to. So when Rosh Hashanah comes along, we have to begin to stop looking at concealment as the absence of God and start looking at it as the presence of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals as his absence. That the tzimtzum is not a removal, it's the revelation of a concealing thing. The Leshem Shuvah V'Chaloma says this. He says that the tzimtzum is the gilui of a koyach hamastir. That the tzimtzum, the creation of the world, is the revelation of a certain element of concealment that blocks over the infinite light so that there can be some mode of functioning and separateness in this world. But applied to our own daily lives, this becomes a profoundly redemptive tool. That every time I encounter anything that feels distant, anytime I encounter anything that feels removed from Hashem, all I need to do is close my eyes even deeper and I say, Hashem, you're here also, and you're the one who's going to give me the koach to move out of this concealment. The name that we think about when the Baal Tokeya is getting ready to be Tokeya is Kuf Reish Ayin Shin Tes Nun. Right, the second stanza of Ana B'Koach. And what that spells out is cross Satan, is that we're trying to tear the Satan asunder. We're trying to rip apart the concealment. We're trying to reveal how all of that darkness, all of the position of distance is there just to be torn open, is there for a person to break on through to the other side, to be like Yosef who's Yotze Mebeis Asurim. That to be Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the Welt, to be Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu on ourselves, to be Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu in all of the places that we feel that Hashem is not king. Chazal already say, why did Hashem want to reveal a world like this? That's Hashem's cheshbon. Mashal Mahadavar Doma Lemelech Sheratza Livnos as Paltarachlon al Betocha Ashpa. Right, the example of Hashem creating the world is like a king who decided to build his palace in a dung heap, in a garbage dump. Why Hashem decided to conceal himself, why Hashem decided to reveal the world the way he did, that's not up to us. Our avodah is to be makabel ol malchus shamayim and say, Hashem, we are here to find you in all of this. And when we can accomplish that on Rosh Hashanah for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for our loved ones, for our relationship in Torah, for our relationship in Tefillah, everything changes. What went from either being good davening and bad davening now goes to davening. Because there's no such thing as bad davening. If I'm saying the words and I don't have a machshava that's connecting me, so my avodah is to connect myself even without feeling a connection. When I'm learning a sugya, if I'm still operating in that place where there's distance, so then a kushya or a suffix is something that's antagonistic to the sugya. And it's something that I need to fight against. But from a perspective of unity, Hashem is found in the kushya as much as he's found in the teretz. Kadosh Baruch Hu is found in the desire for truth as much as he's found in the truth. There's nothing that we can't encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu in. And on Rosh Hashanah, when we're mamlech ourselves on this, that gives us the strength to then enter into a place of teshuvah. For a person, Rosh Hashanah is not about teshuvah. Rosh Hashanah is not about teshuvah. Aseret Simei teshuvah is about teshuvah. The shofar is there to wake us up so that we can begin to do the work of teshuvah. Because if a person goes into the avodah of teshuvah thinking that there's times where Hashem is there and there's times where Hashem is not there, then my teshuvah is going to be pathological. That I'm always going to be trying to make up for missed attempts and fix broken things, and I'm going to start serving Hashem from the posture of having made mistakes that need to be fixed right now. And if I don't fix those mistakes, then I'm not welcomed at the table. And we know what happens with that position. Penimius disavows that just as the Torah disavows that. There's teshuvah, avada, but teshuvah is just an extension of coming closer and closer and closer and closer. The only preparation that we need for teshuvah is understanding that Hashem is found everywhere in our lives, even when I feel distant. Once I know that Hashem is found when I feel distant, then I can enter into a place of teshuvah. And so the proper understanding of what it means to feel distance from Hashem is the prerequisite for entering into the Aseret Simei teshuvah. Because if I'm going to the Aseret Simei teshuvah and I'm saying I'm so far from Hashem and the only way I'm going to be close to you, Hashem, is if I fix everything and get better and do this, that, or the other thing, so then I need a good psychologist. I don't need a good rabbi. Right? The avodah of teshuvah is coming to realize that Hashem, there's never been a time that I'm far from you. And karov elecha hadavar ma'od befichu levavcha la'asoso. How can I say that if it's dependent on anything? The only way I could say it's always present is if it's dependent on nothing but my mind, of attaching myself to Hashem and realizing, Hashem, you're here with me in this also, and I could come close to you. I could come back to you because I was never far from you. All I have to do is teshuvah. Teshuvah is a way of coming close. And so Rosh Hashanah is the opener. Rosh Hashanah is the place where we accept unconditionally the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, specifically in places that it's not apparent, which means that Rosh Hashanah is the vessel of concealment that enables us to accept upon ourselves the fact that we will see you, Hashem, in the concealment. And then from that place, we can enter into spiritual growth where we're trying to become closer and closer rather than feeling that we're outside of the circle. And it shifts everything. It shifts the entire posture that one has. And so Be'ezras Hashem, that's the avodah. The avodah is to realize that Rosh Hashanah is the gilui of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light that is so profoundly illuminated that it's present both in the darkness and the light. And when I come to accept HaKadosh Baruch Hu everywhere, then I can begin to grow from a place of enoughness rather than a place of deficiency. Trying to grow from a place of not being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a very painful thing. Because a person feels that if only I do the work correctly, then Hashem will be with me. And that's kfirah. Hashem is always with us. And so the work of teshuvah is accepting upon myself that I'm always close to you, Hashem, and you're always close to me. And even though I feel distant right now, okay, so that distance has to be cultivated and become a vessel for my closeness to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but there's nothing outside of you. It's like the Paitan Ibn Gabriel says about Rosh Hashanah, Hineni boirech mimcha elecha. I'm running from you to you. I'm running from you to you. I'm afraid of your absence and I'm running towards you from within that absence. I'm coming to realize that you're everywhere. And with that machshava, every mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah is illuminated. Shofar, apple and the honey, the tefillos, they're all reflective of the same process of encountering darkness and pushing through it and coming to realize that Hashem is the darkness itself. And that when we come to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the darkness, so then a new type of light emerges and we have new strength for the incoming year. Be'ezras Hashem. Okay, Chavra, so that's the Nakuda. And again, I apologize if it was meandering a little bit, but I think that the Nakuda comes across. And what I'm happy to do, if anybody's interested, is that I can send a few Makoros afterwards that I mentioned, some of the Makoros that talk about these ideas in a clear way, especially the letter from Rav Simcha Bunim, because you'll see when you have these general ideas in the back of your mind, you're going to find that when you're learning the Sfarim HaKadoshim, there's going to be a familiarity. And then you're going to see, meaning in penimius, you'll see 1,000 different terms for what concealment means. Sometimes you'll see pardinim and shachdinim and klipos and olam ha'asiya. All of them are synonyms. All of them represent the same thing, concealment. And then you're going to see or and chayus and shefa and tikkun. All of those are also synonyms. They mean light. The whole process is concealment and revelation. Everything else is just extended terms that give us more and more footholds and oznayim l'Torah to enter into the sugya. But the gans sugya is ha'elam and giloi. And be'ezras Hashem, we should be zoicha to higalena. I remember hearing from Rav Weinberger once in Shal Shudas in the basement in Eish Kodesh, this was many, many years ago, where he said that he could really summarize the entire project of Eish Kodesh as the line in Yedid Nefesh, higalena. Higalena. That there has to be a demand for revelation. And a demand for revelation. And this is, if anyone learns Ishbitzer Radzin, this is the whole Enrav Tzadok, this is the whole Gans Inyan, that they call Hashem's bluff. They came to a very clear place where any element of concealment from Hashem is also the presence of Hashem, and therefore there's no place that we can't serve Hashem. There's no position in which we can't serve Hashem. But the beginning is Merachok Hashem Nirali. I have to feel distance in order to realize that Hashem is in the distance as well. Be'ezras Hashem. I'm just going to end the recording for now.